Welcome. It's great to be here, and it is fabulous also to welcome our regular panellists throughout the series, a Paralympic gold medalist and ANZ ambassador, Dylan Alcott. Dylan, great to have you here again.
G'day, Brad. Great to be here, mate. I've got to say, it's been an incredible series so far, and today's episode is no different, so I'm very excited.
Well, today we are talking about resilience and perspective, and to enlighten us into resilience and perspective in their worlds, we welcome Maile Carnegie, ANZ Group Executive, Digital and Australia Transformation. Maile, thank you for joining us.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you for including me.
And also joining us today, rounding out the group, we have Ben Crowe, professional mentor and leadership coach. Great to have you here, Ben.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me. Great to see you again.
There's a lot to talk about for obvious reasons right now around resilience and perspective. So let's get rolling. Maile, it goes without saying, doesn't it? We talk about resilience, and it's something that we've all had to call on the last few months.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, I think it's really been getting comfortable with the new environment, really getting comfortable with, on one hand, this should sound very positive, but getting comfortable with spending a lot more time with my family, which I am loving, but it comes with some challenges, but also being comfortable having very different relationships, with my work colleagues and all sorts of stuff. But absolutely, we've all had to dig a bit deeper than we probably did before.
Ben, you do a lot of work around resilience and perspective. Are you able to explain the work that you do around perspective and mindset with athletes and also executives?
Yeah, sure. Whether you're the CEO of ANZ or you're a teenage boy or girl, or whether you're Ash Barty or whether you're Dylan Alcott, we're all in search of the same two things, kind of confidence and happiness. To find those two things, and the work I do with clients is to help them answer two simple but not easy questions. The first one is, who am I? Like, really, who am I really? And the second one is, what do I want? Now, if you can answer the first one, that gets you closer to finding confidence. Definitely confidence in your own skin and embracing your imperfections and unconditional self-worth. It requires you to take your mask off and your armor off in order to do that. Yeah. And the second one, if you can answer the second question, what do I want? That gets you closer to finding happiness, especially if what you want unlocks not only your goals, professional and personal goals, but also finding that sense of purpose and meaning and contribution and fulfillment beyond yourself. But you can't work out what you want until you work out who you are. And most of us don't want to do that. So because we're petrified, what we might find is, I'm not good enough. I'm not loved enough, right? So we keep that mask on and armor on for self-preservation purposes. And then rather than going internal, we go external and we start craving recognition or caring about materialistic things or extrinsically motivated, hoping that they'll give us what we're not prepared to give ourselves, that unconditional self-worth and self-love and self-acceptance. So, and in order to do that, there's kind of three mindsets that we work on with, CEOs or athletes. The first one is connection mindset. So really connecting with yourself and then connecting with your team. The second one is purpose mindset, which also unlocks your motivations and your needs and your goals and so forth. And the third one is performance mindset, which is in a moment of performance, how I can focus my attention on the things I can control and the best version of me and not get distracted by the things that typically sabotage performances, which is the fear of failure or focusing on the result, the fear of success. And unfortunately, life itself is a performance right now, and there's just so many distractions that are taking us away from the best version of ourselves.
Dylan, I know you've worked with Ben. How hard is it to find out who you really, really are?
It can be incredibly hard, mate. It was one of the best experiences that I've ever been through was working with Ben. I've always been, very lucky that I've at times performed well, and I've always had probably not always. When I was a lot younger, I really struggled about my disability, and I really had no purpose. I hated the person that I was, and I found life really tough. I was able to overcome that when I, into my teenage years and early 20s, and I really had a positive perception about who I was out of that. I was really proud to have a disability. I was really proud of the person that I was, and I wanted to share that with as many people as I possibly could. And when I worked with Ben, I realized that was my purpose. My purpose wasn't winning Grand Slams or gold medals. My purpose was trying to help as many people like me get out and live the lives that they want and deserve to live.
Miley, I could see you there smiling a lot while Dylan was talking. Is that because you can really relate to what he's saying and you know who you are and you know your purpose?
To a degree, I think actually though, well, first of all, I just love hearing Dylan talk. I love his positive energy. It's so infectious. So that's probably one big reason why I'm smiling. But for me, I think one of the things that's potentially a little bit different for a corporate exec versus an athlete is it took me a long time to understand that actually, for me, my personal resilience and my ability to perform at work was actually only partially a mental agility or driven by mental kind of resilience. And really what I needed to almost put more time and energy into was my physical and emotional and, you know, and really almost looking after the whole self versus just thinking that I needed to, you know, just focus on being better, kind of mentally sharper. And so actually for me, the real kind of wake up moment, was, you know, during a time where my mum had been diagnosed with cancer. I had 2 young kids. There was just a whole lot of stuff in life kind of slamming together. It was probably the only time in my career where I genuinely thought that I couldn't work full time, that I was going to have to, you know, actually go to part-time work. And actually by taking the time to invest in my physical health, my emotional health, that actually meant that I had a hugely more energy to draw from and kind of, you know, and become more resilient mentally and at work. And I think that's something that athletes probably intuitively or inherently understand. They work on all those different elements, but I think as in the corporate world, we don't spend as much time on that. Mm. But I think once I kind of got that kind of physical, emotional and mental resilience, that's when I started actually having the energy to really think about what my purpose was. So, you know, for me, it's very, you know, driven by family. But the other thing for me is it's very much driven by a huge sense of just gratitude for what Australia as a nation has given to me. I think about, you know, again, I was born in America. And it's at the moment quite hard not to draw parallels with what's happening in Australia versus the States. But, you know, I was given a free education, free healthcare, extraordinary opportunities in Australia. I feel incredibly grateful for this to Australia. And so part of my purpose is I want to try and give something back and what I can uniquely potentially help with. And I'm really passionate about seeing whether even in a really small way I can help to improve the innovation and the economic resilience of Australia. So I do a lot of work both, you know, at ANZ, but outside of ANZ trying to work on that. But I actually think also as an Australians, one of the things that's difficult for us in terms of embracing a sense of personal purpose is that's something, again, Americans are pretty comfortable with, but I think Australians, it makes you sound like you're a bit full of yourself when you start talking about purpose. So I think actually as Australians, it's a bit harder. And even now I'm blushing at, you know, declaring what my purpose is, because it does make you sound pretty self-indulgent and pretty full of yourself.
And we need that, don't we, Ben, as individuals, but also as organisations to understand what a purpose is, why we're there, what are we doing?
Yeah, every business in the world, every person in the world, right, everyone on this call, we all live and die on the success of the same 3 things: how we think, what we prioritize, and the decisions that we make. And if we can challenge how we think, but fundamentally why we exist, not what and how we do, but why we do it, you can create the most extraordinary competitive advantage and point of difference in terms of how you show up against your competitive set. But on a personal level, create this sense of purpose and meaning and fulfillment rather than achieving, because achievement without fulfillment is the ultimate failure in life, right? So, and purpose for me is you just here to show up and make a truckload of money and win, or fundamentally you stand for something. Yeah? You believe in something. There's something that lights you up. There's something you want to be famous for. There's a legacy you want to leave the planet. And at your funeral, these are the things will be celebrated about you at your eulogy.
So if we move then on to resilience, and we'll start with you, Dylan. Are you a naturally resilient person, would you say, or have you had to work on it?
Oh, I've definitely had to work on it. You know, I brush over sometimes about how tough, I guess, it was for me growing up with my disability, and at those times I wasn't that resilient with it, and I think it's okay even to this day I think we as people are often too stoic and we don't show our emotions and we aren't vulnerable. An example where, sometimes it doesn't happen to me as much these days because people might know my name, but having a disability is hard sometimes with things like discrimination and lack of opportunity and things like that. And previously when something like the US Open, which announced they weren't having wheelchair tennis, I could have been openly really resilient and just taken a hard stance, but I was devastated that they made that decision, and I was open about that, and it really hurt me. And I think previously when I would have been faced with something like that in my life, whether my girlfriend and I go to a bar and they tell me I can't go in because of steps or whatever, I would have taken a really hard, resilient approach, told them to ship off, and then stormed off and I said, I'm fine, and I don't really care. But things like that affect me, and that's okay to be vulnerable. And I think especially in times like this, yes, we have to, be resilient in what we do, but the best way to be resilient is to talk about how you're feeling and to be vulnerable in that situation. And when you do need it, is to get help. Because I think, especially in an Australian culture, we try and always, not show our vulnerability and always try and say that we're fine and we'll get on with whatever's going on. And especially in a situation like this at the moment where it's different for all of us, you know what I mean? And I think you can often fall into a trap of trying to be too resilient and trying to take on too much for yourself. And I know I've been guilty of that. And it affects my relationship sometimes. It affects my performance. It affects me as a tennis player and things like that. And yeah, there are times when I'm resilient on the court where I will look at the opponent. I'll say, there is no way in hell you're going to win this next point. You know what I mean? That's a part of resilience as well. There is that competitive side of it. But I think as I'm developing as a person, I'm starting to be a bit more vulnerable in what I do. And I think that is actually a show of resilience when you can ask for help and get assistance and get through it.
So Maile, what are examples of everyday resilience that you see and you call on?
Well, I think for me, I feel incredibly lucky because I was raised in an extraordinarily loving family. It actually took me quite a long time to actually appreciate what a really deep, just advantage that gives you. When people talk about inheritance, people always think about money. What monetarily have you inherited? And, my parents were both teachers, and so I'm going to probably inherit very little money, and I hope they spend every cent that they have. My biggest inheritance was just how unbelievably unconditionally loved I was. And so I feel like that has set me up to have a degree of resilience that people who aren't born or raised in that kind of environment have to work much, much harder to achieve. But, I do have to work on it. And for me, probably the thing that has come easiest for me is to work on my physical resilience. The thing that's probably been the hardest for me that I have to work on very consciously is how I am emotionally resilient. Not that but it's actually linked to what Dylan was saying earlier. My bias is to show no vulnerability. I mean, literally, I have to work very, very hard to actually demonstrate a degree of openness to when I don't feel confident, when I don't know what the answers are, because for whatever reason, my kind of go-to is, just charge forward and never show that there's any emotional chink in the armor. So that's what I really need to work on, and I am still working on it to this day. But I feel very blessed to be in terms of my upbringing and all the advantage and inheritance that I've been given in my life.
Ben, you've worked with a lot of big name athletes and still do. You work with Dylan and Ash Barty at the moment. You've worked with some reasonably successful athletes like Andre Agassi and Michael Jordan. Were they naturally resilient, and tell us as much as you can tell us.
Yeah.
They've had to work on it too, I imagine.
Yeah, totally. I think, unfortunately, we've got this unconscious negative bias through this reptilian brain that we've all got that was designed to protect us more so than think positively about ourselves and combine that with imagination and memory. The stories we often tell ourselves about ourselves aren't great ones, regardless of our circumstances. So I think everyone on the planet has to develop a level of resilience. But we might be lucky that we've got good role models around us to teach us values and to teach us perspective, if you like. And for me, resilience is having a perspective where you understand it's our decisions, not the conditions, that determine our mindset, our self-worth, and our attitude. Right? If you don't have that, the conditions will determine your mindset for you. And during pandemics, if the conditions are negative, right, it's effectively saying if it's rainy, I'll be sad. If it's sunny, I'll be happy. But which is kind of crazy because we're abdicating responsibility for living. The ability to choose our response. So Michael Jordan learned very early from his parents a sense of purpose, and his dad in particular, about having an impact on someone else's life and how to work hard at something. Where Andre kind of learned the hard way, where he had to, he blew out to 141 in the world, and everything in his life was a lie, and he lost his marriage, and he lost his relationship with his family. He lost his coach who sacked him. But through that awful downward spiral, he found his sense of purpose. And with that perspective shift, he unlocked the authentic Andre Agassi. And from that place, he created a team around him. He was one of the first tennis players to say we, not I, similar to what Dylan and Ash does. He found love. He found Steffi Graf and had 2 beautiful kids. He got back to #1 in the world, and he created $1 billion business around education for kids at risk of not getting an education. So if you think about that before and after, sometimes it's in the darkest moments where we have the greatest growth, right? If we have that perspective though, and perspective is just the way we view things, or our attitude towards things. And sometimes we're lucky to have great people around us, like family, as Maile mentioned. But sometimes we learn in very different ways. But I guess the big aha for me is no one in this world can do anything in this world on their own. And that's where vulnerability is so important, as Andre had to lean in, not lean back to the risk and the uncertainty, the emotional exposure that comes with making sense of who he is. And whether you're Ash Barty or anyone else, if you're prepared to do that, have that courage, if you like, it's extraordinary what you can learn about yourself. And then find that sense of acceptance, right? Accept that life is difficult. And once you accept that, life is no longer difficult. Accept the things you can't control and focus back on the things you can control. And one thing that Maile said was there's a beautiful sense of gratitude and appreciation, because that's the antidote to this sense of expectation or entitlement, as if the world owes me something. And when you're just appreciative for what you've got, as opposed to bitching and moaning for what you haven't got, your perspective enables you to deal through, really difficult times like what we're going through at the moment.
What Maile and Ben are saying about having people around you that can help is so essential, and using yourself and your team around you as one unit, as we. And I was never doing that, and I was really struggling about my disability, and I didn't tell my brother, my best mate. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone because I felt like a burden, to be honest. And I realized that, what am I doing? I looked in the mirror, and I'm so lucky that I had this internal aha moment where I looked at myself and said, you know what? I've got to get my life back. You know what I mean? And I started talking to my brother about what was going on, and started, talking about my disability more with my friends and things like that. And what I found was they didn't hate me because I was different. They didn't care the fact that I had a disability. They might have just been a bit more uncomfortable about talking about my disability with me. And I realized as soon as I started becoming comfortable and proud and embracing my imperfections and talking about my disability, my life changed immediately, because everybody around me, started becoming more comfortable about it as well. And it was like a moment that just changed my life forever. It really did. And I have gratitude towards the fact that I have a disability every single day. And people might say, what do you mean? And I'm like, I am so proud of the fact that I have a disability and that I am different. And, I could not care less that I couldn't kick a football like you guys can. I sometimes sit down at the beach and I watch you all walk on the sand, and I go, you know what, I can't do that. And sometimes that might get me down a little bit, but I focus on the 10,000 other things that I can do and the 10,000 other legends that are in my life. I really do. And that was the key to unlocking me becoming who I am today.
Miley's 100% spot on there, Dill. Your positivity is infectious. So, Miley, how then, with everything we're dealing with a global pandemic, how do we remain positive right now?
I think for me, it's a couple of things. One is just trying really hard to maintain the perspective that we are, in essence, extraordinarily lucky, right? Even in spite of everything that's going on, you know, in the scheme of things, we are living in a wonderful country with a huge amount of support. I'm sure there's a lot of people who need more or whatever, but in the scheme of things, I feel incredibly grateful that if I have to go through this pandemic, I'd much prefer to be doing it in Australia than a whole bunch of other places around the world. So I think trying hard to maintain that perspective and that gratitude for what we do have is important. But then the other one, I think, which is really important for me, but I think it's important for most other people, is maintaining those daily, weekly, monthly, almost hygiene habits and practices that we had when we aren't in COVID, that help to keep us grounded and centered. You know, they're probably the exercise habits, the eating habits. I think, you know, I've seen people go one of two ways in COVID. They either have completely dropped the bundle and have put on, you know, multiple kilos and are drinking every night, or they've made the decision that they're going to come out of this, you know, physically, you know, healthier than where they started. And I can almost guarantee the people who have chosen the second path, who have, you know, actually kept up or improved their kind of healthy habits, are going to be much more resilient probably and doing much better than the people who are taking the drinking and every night and eating donuts. But anyway, but that's for me, gratitude, you know, perspective, and trying to maintain healthy habits.
Absolutely. And Ben, I think a lot of us have seen a really powerful, simple quote during COVID, and that is, we're not stuck at home, we're safe at home. And I know when I think of that and when I mention it to other people, they find themselves going, yeah, that's a really different perspective on things. From your experience, can it be just really simple things that can reframe our thinking?
Yeah, totally, Brad. We are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, and we decide that story. So yes, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're absolutely right. And you suddenly realize that it's not the experiences of our life that determine our life. It's the meaning we put behind the experiences, the narrative behind the experiences, the stories we tell ourselves about the experiences. Two people can have the exact same experience, right? The exact same trauma, but two very different stories. Person A will say, you see, this always happens to me. This is my lot in life. I'm a loser. This is my life. Person B will go, wow, that was heavy, but I'm not going to let that determine my life. I'm going to dedicate this moment and go a certain other way. Yeah, post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic growth. And we actually decide. So it can be creating, as you said, simple mantras or simple affirmations, which might be as simple as, this too shall pass. Yeah, the world will get through this and you will get through this. And this chapter will define so many leaders once we realize it's our decisions, not our conditions. Another mantra might be as simple as, our greatest growth comes from our darkest times. Yeah, our greatest learnings come from our most difficult times, because there's a reason for that. It unlocks the most amazing sense of humility, yeah, and humanity and learning. Yeah. So if you do start to telling yourself those stories and own your story and that unconditional self-worth, but also celebrate the imperfections of life, because let's face it, life is imperfect and life is uncertain and life is vulnerable. So you either embrace that and lean into that, or we lean back. And I think as any good surfer or snowboarder knows, you've got to lean in, if you like, rather than lean back, or you kind of fall down. And as Dylan was alluding, there's effectively two types of people on the planet right now. Those who see vulnerability as a strength and those who view it as a weakness. And if you view vulnerability as a weakness, typically three things happen. You're quite closed, closed-minded, defensive, on the back foot, feeling like you're being attacked. You're not very compassionate. First for yourself, because you think you have to be this perfect specimen, right? So you put on that perfection mask and so forth. And if I'm not being compassionate for myself, I can't be compassionate to anyone else, because we've got to put that oxygen mask on ourselves first before we fit it on someone else. And therefore I won't create that connection. But if you go the other way, if you embrace vulnerability as a strength and you lean in to the risk and the uncertainty, the emotional exposure that comes with that, as Dylan referenced, the opposite three things happen. You're more open, open-minded, curious, creative, innovative, whatever word you want to use. You're incredibly compassionate, first for yourself. And it's probably the number one issue on the planet right now, Brad, especially through the pandemic. We are so hard on ourselves as a human race, and we have to cut ourselves some slack, give ourselves a break, and have a little bit more self-acceptance, self-worth, self-love, self-compassion, whatever word you want to use it. We just got to be kinder to ourselves first. Then we can be compassionate to others as leaders or as parents, and then we can create the most amazing connection that as humans we're hardwired for.
And I love an extension of that, Ben. You talk about, and I'm after input from everyone here, celebrating our weird, who we are.
Yeah, embracing, what we don't realize as humans, because we're trying to be this perfect specimen, right? But it's imperfections that connect humans the most. So if you think about your relationship with your family or your relationship with your best mates, it's the little things, it's the nuances, it's the self-deprecating humor, it's the nicknames, the laughter, the tears, the stories, everything that Dylan carries on about 24/7. That's the gold, right? We call these things imperfections, but it's imperfections that connect humans the most. The world is imperfect right now, right? And you're seeing the most amazing connection in terms of the sense of humanity. During the bushfires over the summer, suddenly we got off our banana lounges taking selfies of our feet, and we started caring about the country burning down and the welfare of animals and caring for the community. So once we realize that imperfections that connect us, right, we can take off that mask and embrace our weird and celebrate those things. And that's where authenticity and vulnerability and connection kind of come in.
What about you, Maile? Do you like to celebrate the weird in your world?
Well, I think for me, I got much more comfortable about celebrating, and I won't say weird. I got much more comfortable celebrating just the wonderful gloriousness of difference. When my first son has some special needs, and I think one of the best kind of reframing of that for me was when someone said, Maile, you know, when everyone has a child, they've kind of got in their head that they're traveling to Bali. And when you have a child that's got, you know, special needs, it's not, you know, you're not going to Bali anymore, you're going to Greenland. It's not that Greenland is better or worse than Bali, it's just different. And so once you get your head around the fact that it's not better or worse, it's just different, then you can start celebrating the wonderful difference of it. And my son is so extraordinary. The people who take the time to get to know him just adore him. And he has made me an immeasurably better person. And he has made it much easier and more enjoyable for me to celebrate my difference and, you know, anything about me that's a little bit weird and wonderful. But that was probably the turning point for me in terms of just everything that Ben has just said. I've become a radically more compassionate person. And it's just an extraordinary gift that my son gave me.
Fabulous. Dylan, we'll finish with you. Maile touched on reframing there. You know all about that. You know all about celebrating the weird. And look at you, you just love life and you love who you are, which is just fabulous to see.
Yeah, you know I'm a massive weirdo, and I love that. And you know what? It was so funny. I remember I would have been about 16, and everyone is always jockeying for position, you know, like trying to like get higher up in the food chain of the social circles, even in business and whatever. And everybody wants to be different. Everybody wants a different car. Everyone wears different clothes. Everyone has different hairstyles. And I remember looking at myself going, what better way to be different than have a disability? If you frame it the right way in your own mindset, it can be a, you know, competitive advantage in everything that I did. And I started doing that, and I started embracing it, and it opened me up to a completely different world of meeting people of all kinds of disabilities and who are doing all kinds of different incredible things. And it made me, as we talked about, it made me more compassionate of you know, everybody around me, whether they had a disability or not. And I mean what I say is that I'm so proud to be different, and people often say, oh, don't say that you're different. You know, you're not different. You're just like us. And I'm like, no. I am different. I have a disability, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I fully embrace that because I'm really proud of it. And hearing, you know, Maile, you talk about that warms my heart, because there are so many parents and out there who are about to have kids with disabilities or about to have kids with difference, or people from ANZ are about to experience a trauma or whatever it is. And they might see that as an extremely negative thing. And it's not. it's a different thing, yes, but it can enrich your life in so many different ways that you could not even imagine possible. And that's what it's done to my life, and that's what it's done to my family. And hopefully we come out of this pandemic where there are a lot of negative things happening, and we find the positive avenues that we can take and hopefully enrich our lives in the process.
The great thing about the Wellbeing Conversation, whether you are watching or you are part of the panel, is we're all learning so much. I ask all of you involved today, and we'll start with you, Maile. We're never too old to learn, and some of the things you all had to say there was just so insightful.
Absolutely. And, for me, I walk away with just Dylan's positivity and Ben's just awesome intelligence. It's like, been such a pleasure.
Ben, we're going through a difficult time right now, but with the right mindset and reframing and perspective and resilience, we'll get through, won't we?
Yeah, totally. Once we realise it's our decisions, not the conditions of our environment, that determines our mindset and our self-worth and our attitude. And once we realise that, we can decide to be positive and confident and calm, or we'll be distracted by the conditions around us. And I think once we realise that we're in control of our decisions and our mindset, we don't let the conditions own it for us. And then we've got all the power in the world.
And Dylan, you have so much wonderful wisdom there. What are you working on now? What do you still need to master?
I'll tell you what I've learned, even just having this chat now, not only that everybody on this call is incredible, but how powerful and refreshing and how happy I feel just talking to people. You know what I mean? Like, I feel great after that discussion. I really do. Like, I think it's been a tough time for everyone, and, we are told to socially distance, but you've got to reach out and talk to people. And like, I feel rejuvenated. I've got a smile on my face, you know what I mean? And it just shows the power of talking to people and having an honest, vulnerable chat. It can honestly change your mindset immediately and change your life as a result. So I feel privileged to be part of it, mate. I really do.
I know my mum often says a problem shared is a problem halved. I don't think mum came up with a quote, but she uses it. And
claim it as hers. That's what I do.
She's absolutely spot on. To all of our panellists today, Maile, thank you very much. Ben, thank you. And Dylan.
Pleasure, Brad.
Thank you. It's been really insightful and a lot of fun. And to all of you, thank you very much for joining us on the Wellbeing Conversation.
Hey everyone, Dylan Alcott again. Now, we touched on a few topics around mental health throughout that chat. Now, if that brought up anything for you, make sure you reach out to beyondblue.org.au, or their phone number is 1300 22 4636. You can also hit up Lifeline on 13 11 14, or reach out to the people within your ANZ teams and they'll be able to help. And here's a little taste on what's coming up on the next episode of the Wellbeing Conversation.
I'm just not quite good at problem solving if I haven't sort of had some time to exercise and clear my mind.
I'm grumpy. I'm a grumpy dude if I don't get out and about and get some fresh air, I've realised.
I find if I don't exercise, then, my sleep patterns completely change. I'm awake early.
I look at my beautiful dog Sauce, and I think he looks at me and says, Dad, please don't take me for another walk.
It was a very unfortunate few seconds in my life, but it was also quite a scary experience. And I got put in a neck brace and stretched it off the ground.
The one thing I learned is when I'm not physically active, geez, it affects my mental well-being.
People just need to remember what's important is their health as the primary issue, and everything else should come after that.